On this program this afternoon, we're going to be examining ways that we can use the wedge. Now, you know what I mean by the wedge, okay? The medical missionary work is to be an entering wedge by which we can enter in to a field of work and have a good reception for the third angel's or all three angels' messages. Have you ever split wood by hand using a splitting maul and a wedge? There is a proper orientation to the wedge. If I want to hold a wedge in my hand, I want to hold it properly, because if I hold it improperly, I'm going to hurt myself. And we can damage our own work if we do not know how to use the wedge properly. And you folks have gone the first step in using the wedge properly, and that is getting an opportunity for some exposure to some education, because many people do not understand anatomy and physiology. They know nothing about the human organism. They go out and they proclaim themselves as medical missionaries, and it isn't long before we're human. We slip up, we say something that offends some highly educated person, and they say, excuse me, you made a goof there, and you look like a fool. So we want to make sure we don't do that as much as possible. And you know, I catch myself sometimes, when I do tape programs sometimes, and when I do class presentations, I do rerun in my mind after the program's over, and I say, whoops, that wasn't quite right. And maybe, just maybe, I've said some things here that weren't quite right. But if we can learn the majority of things and say as much as we can quite right, always relying on the Holy Spirit to help us say the things as right as we can say them, it's a lot better than going out and making some kind of a monkey out of ourselves because we have no idea what we're dealing with. How are we going to use the wedge to finish this work? I want to give you some practical guidelines. Theory is theory is theory, and it's great as long as theories go. But let's put it into some practical terms. Let's get our hands on it. I mean, let's get this wedge out of theory and into our hands so I can hold the cold steel in my hand and feel the thing. Ding it and hear it ring. You know, I want practical things. I heard people talk about the platform of truth for so long, I had to finally figure out what it was and draw pictures of it and label it. I couldn't stand not knowing what it looked like. How are we going to use the wedge? I want to give you some examples from how I have done some experiments, and these are not the only ways. In fact, these are only a few ways, and as you go out and do some experimenting of your own, you're going to find new ways as well. I have found that if you have some education or some sort of background in natural remedies and natural healing, be it herbology, hydrotherapy, nutrition, whatever, and you've gotten a pretty good smattering of all of those this week. If you have that, you have an opportunity to go and make yourself some little posters, little flyers, little brochures, whatever you want to call it. You can go around your community and hang them up in bulletin boards. You might even be able to get the local newspaper to publish it as a little article, as a human interest thing. You now can hold some little meetings. And many times you can get a Grange Hall or a senior citizen center or whatever, a room somewhere, for a very low cost, sometimes free, if you can get a school to give you an opportunity. Sometimes they aren't available. And you can hold a meeting. And I would urge you to consider possibly not doing this in a church, because whatever church it is, someone's prejudiced against it. If it's our church or another church or whatever, there's always someone who's prejudiced against that, and you'll prevent them from coming in because of their prejudice against whoever owns the building. So I like to find neutral places that people aren't intimidated by. And I have just put up little signs around. Herbal healing classes, 7 o'clock Tuesday evening, Kettle Falls Senior Citizen Center. Learn how to use herbs for your family, cut your medical bills, whatever. You can be creative with your own little handbills. It's great if you've got a computer and you can do some different fonts and, put a border around it, make it look a little interesting. Maybe put it on colored paper. Don't just use white because it's going to die on the bulletin board wherever it goes. Use colored paper. If you want to take these out and go door to door and hand them out on a Sabbath afternoon, you can cover a small town in a few hours. That's fine. That's another way to do it. Get them out where people see them. Another way to do that is using the evangelistic chair massage. Set yourself up in a little store somewhere or in a restaurant or on a sidewalk if it's nice weather. A lot of little towns have a little town square, or they've got a little boulevard somewhere where people kind of just hang out type of thing. Set up a couple of chairs, start, put up a sign with a little stand, start giving some free massages out, whatever. Hand one of these little brochures to everybody that comes and goes, people that go by. You'll get a lot of publicity that won't cost you a lot of money, really pretty easy. And if you know what you're talking about and you can drop a few little hints here and there, if people say, well, like what kind of remedies? I mean, what would you do? And maybe you could give, some salve and some various herb teas to help, get rid of the flu or the cold or things for aches or pains, or, you're not going to say, come to our meetings, we'll cure your cancer. I mean, stay away from controversial, scary things. Just go with things that people are excited about. Almost any mother who says that she has children who have the flu or they want to learn how to help their immune system, whatever, these people will come. I have discovered, and of course it's going to vary by locality, but where I am, many, many people are very interested in health. And I think as people get sicker and punier and more sickly, we're probably going to see even more of them have more interest than they have right now. But we discovered that we could almost fill up a little Grange Hall by just doing that very easily. And of course, all these people come, they have no idea who you are and you have no idea who they are. And you'll bring in some strange people along with some very nice people. You have no idea. The gospel net catches good fish and bad fish, clean fish and unclean fish. And we just take whoever we can get in the door and we begin to teach our classes. And immediately, people have reservations about who we might be, but as we begin to talk and share things and use some demonstrations and show them how to make a tea and how to make a tincture or how to make a salve or whatever, these people begin to warm up and they get excited and they get friendly and they hang around after the class, and you say, well, we really only got through a little bit of this evening. I'm really sorry. If you guys want to come back next weekend, we'll go ahead and rent this building again. We'll do it again next Tuesday or whatever. And they say, oh, sure. And I'd sure love to bring my sister, and you'll get more people the second night. Constantly, friends, be giving the three angels messages through very little non-obtrusive little manners, like refer that it is God who supplies the power behind these things. And I like when I'm talking about leaves and whatever, I talk about Revelation 22, the tree of life with the phytochemicals that is for the healing of the nations. We can go referring to the dietary laws in Leviticus if you find it applicable, or the Genesis 1:29 definition of what nutrition's all about. And you can be sharing some little things about pure air and exercise. Share little bits. Don't push too heavy. Use your natural healing class as a vehicle or a carrier that you move something in with. That you'll find to be very, very beneficial in making friends with people that you can begin to share things with. And you'll be able to make friends enough that you'll be comfortable in asking these people, would they perhaps like to take a tract home with them? Or if you have them sign up and you have their name and address, you can call on them and begin to share more information with them. You have two opportunities here. One is you can either go out and do cold calls, or you can call on people that you know. It's a little easier to call on people that you know, that you've seen before. They recognize you. But cold calling is fine. But what I'm talking about is people say, how am I going to make this a door-to-door work? Do I just as a medical missionary, load up this big backpack full of stuff and walk around and, anybody sick in there? And they're going to go, no, but there's sure somebody sick out there. You know, we don't want to appear that we're a little bit more eccentric than necessary or crazy. But you know, if I were to print up a nice little tract or use some things that have already been printed up, nice little tracts, this one's on water, or sunlight or exercise. We've got 8 laws of health, okay? That's 8 excuses for me to go to someone's house. And I can just knock on the door and say, hi there, how are you doing? My name is, and I tell them who I am, and you know, I'm interested in health, and I'm just kind of trying to share with the people in my community some information on health so that people in my community are healthier. You know, I'm kind of a humanitarian in my nature, and I've got a little pamphlet here on water and how pure water can be good for your health, and thought maybe you might enjoy it. Hey, have a nice day, see you later. I didn't ask them to buy anything or give me anything, or, you know, they have no reason to boot me off their doorstep. So it's benign. I'm not intimidated. They're not intimidated. I'm not afraid. And I can cover the whole neighborhood in a short amount of time. Well, next week I can go back by, and you know, when I've got time, I go back and say, hi, how are you doing? You know, did you get a chance to read my little paper I left you on water? Well, probably they say no. Some of them did, but you know, the majority are going to say no. That's just typical. And you say, well, you know, do you still have it? Well, I think the kids might have lost it under the coffee table, or whatever. Well, here, I got another one here for you, but let me show you a little bit of what it's about here. And you talk to them a little bit about water, and you've got maybe some of the highlights in there or whatever, and you know, that's pretty interesting. Here, let me give you another one. Okay. And so next week you come back again. Well, this time they did read it because they were embarrassed that the kids, or they threw it away. And now you can leave them one on pure air, and you talk a little bit. And each time you want to do this, you want to have a whole lot more information that you've studied than just what's in the tract, so they'd realize, hey, this guy really knows something about health. About by the 3rd week, they're going to either say, you know, I'm not interested in health at all. I'd rather eat meat and, you know, smoke my cigarettes and you know, whatever I'm going to do. But most people are interested in health. And just maybe they might have providentially gotten ill during the week, or somebody they know or whatever, and they might want to know what else you might be able to tell them about health, not just pure air and oxygen or, you know, water. These are benign ways that you can get in a door without making a fool out of yourself and be readily accepted by the people in your community. These are not the only ways. But you know, you've got 8 laws of health, and they mess up the first one. That's about 9 opportunities now to get in the door. And perhaps you're going to find somebody who does have a health problem. And maybe you could say, well, you know, I do know a little bit about herbal things, and I know that if you're having that problem, you know, perhaps, you know, we could make up some herbal salve or something home, bring back by for you next time. You know, in fact, if you're suffering with it right now, I'll bring it tomorrow or whatever. You would? You know, you begin to relieve the suffering the same way that Jesus did in the villages. That's how he got his ready audiences who had listened to him. For 2 reasons. One is people had gratitude in their hearts because he had helped them with healing, and the other one was there were other people who wanted to hang around with him hoping they could get healed as well. Those are some opportunities. The nutrition aspect is very important because you can hold cooking schools. Now, you can hold cooking schools one of 2 ways. I've discovered that they are an excellent way to continue on with your natural remedy classes. Because during part of the natural remedy classes, you say we really need, if we're going to talk about natural remedies, to become intelligent with respect to disease and its causes. Doesn't that make sense? Well, sure, that makes sense to them. Well, how is disease caused? Well, we can begin to share more about the nutrition, and we begin to share some of what we've understood now about animal diseases and the animal connections. And these people are beginning to get their ears just really up, their antennas are going up, they're listening to us. And you can say, by the way, if you folks are interested, I'd be more than willing to come back next week, and I'd bring some people with me who are specialists in nutritious food preparation. These people really understand nutrition. They understand how to make things that are very nutritious, but they're also safe for us. They're totally vegetarian. They have no harmful chemical products in them, and there's no disease factors in them because there's no animal products. If you're really, if you'd be interested, we'd be more than happy to bring several people in who are specialists in this field. There'd be no charge to you. What we did on these programs is we set a bucket by the door with the donations to cover the hall sign written on it, and these people funded the whole program. They more than paid for all of our handout materials. They paid for our hall rent. They paid for everything. Sometimes there was a little left over. We could pay for advertising for the next program out of it. It doesn't cost you anything. They're more than happy to help you with this if you just give them the opportunity. But in doing so, we found that people said, yes, we want to know more about this kind of thing. Would you please do this? In fact, I used to have people call my house who heard I had something to do with those meetings downtown in Kettle Falls and wanted to know, would we do any of these things even before we'd announced them? It's kind of like giving candy to babies. It's not like taking it away from them, it's like giving it to them. They're more than happy to reach out and grab it. Most of the people you're going to encounter are going to be more than happy to cooperate with you and you educating them on better principles. Or you can just hold a nutrition class, a cooking school, whatever you want to call it. Some things to consider in this are the fact that some people you're going to run in contact with are going to say, we found this very embarrassing. We modified a lot of our recipes to include more sugars and more oils so they'd be transition foods, so they'd taste a little better for these people. And they showed up and some of these people said, we don't put that kind of junk in our food. Why are you using so much oil? And we were a little embarrassed and we said, well, because we don't eat this way and people who come to our house say that the food is too bland and too tasteless. And so for people who are not used to this, we've kind of met them on the mid-ground, and they said, well, don't do that for us. We don't need that. We'd rather you just do it the way you normally do it. So next week, the ladies came back with real recipes, and then everybody got along fine after that. Make certain that you have tried your recipes at least 3 times and you haven't had 2 flops. Sometimes they don't always work before you try these things in your demonstrations, because if they don't work, you're going to lose the confidence in the people. Or if it is nasty, then, don't take that down there. I'm amazed at what some people call nutritious health food. We had a lady who runs a restaurant back in the East during the summer times in a tourist town, and she came to a weekend set of meetings, and she was supposed to be undoubtedly the world's greatest cook. And the food that she had for us was so bad that nobody could get it down. The pie, which was pumpkin pie, tasted what everyone in the group said, did you get the Play-Doh pie? Play-Doh pie. Everybody made it was a hit. Play-Doh pie. It was terrible. And then they said those little turkey rolls that kind of look like you'd pick them up in the yard after your dog, and they probably tasted that way. Folks, make sure this stuff is palatable. Very nutritious. We may eat some strange things sometimes, but the people in the world are used to eating very tasty things. Not necessarily nutritious things, but they're not necessarily used to eating things as simple and plain as we do sometimes. And I know that John the Baptist lived on 2 things out in the woods or whatever, and it was pretty coarse and pretty crude. But your average run-of-the-mill person that you're trying to entice towards better nutrition is not going to be impressed by carob pods and wild honey or bread that they lose their false teeth into. And we can lose friends for the kingdom by not thinking simple things. What are some other ways that we can do this? Let people that you have in your sphere of influence know more about you. Don't hide who and what you are. Share who and what you are. People will begin to understand who and what you are. In my community, people everywhere know what I do. Everyone knows that if they get sick, they want to call me because I'm going to help them, and it's not going to cost them an arm and a leg, and they're not going to have to drive 30 miles over the mountain pass to get into town and sit in a long line for about 4 hours and pay $200. They would rather do things the natural way. Now, not everybody's got confidence in natural things. Some people absolutely have no confidence whatsoever. Do not waste your time trying to educate and convert those who are unwilling. Look for the people who are willing. Jesus didn't spend a lot of time with people who were unwilling. He told the disciples, shake the dust off your shoes and move on to someplace else where people are going to listen to you. And so if you share with people something, some people say, well, I'm going to go to another town and knock on doors and do my work, but the vicinity where I live, I want to leave that so I can live in it, okay? I don't want to rile these people up and have them all upset. Friends, that's not fair to those people who live right around you. You need to allow those people the opportunity to know who and what you are and benefit from what you're benefiting from as well. We have found some just incredible experiences by being able to be well known in our community for practicing medical missionary evangelistic work. People have derived good benefits from what we have done, and they have been appreciative for what we have done, and we have made good friends that way that we wouldn't have done any other way. Now, I will guarantee if you help somebody who has a sick baby in the family and you help that person with that sick baby or a sick husband or a sick child or a sick wife or something like that, and it helps those people, now is the time to strike while the iron is hot. Don't lose the opportunity, because 6 weeks after you help them, the experience just doesn't have the same dynamics. You want to deal with the people while they still have that little sense of admiration running around in their head. Strike while the iron is hot. Knock on their door, have an opportunity to go by, drop off a loaf of bread. There are all kinds of opportunities that we can take advantage of. Some people find that to be a medical missionary, that it's also advantage to maybe have some sort of a part-time health-related business, where maybe you would sell herbs in your community. People want to buy some herbs, or people who would want to buy some whole wheat bread or something like that. Many people have had an effective Christian witness by just supplying some of their neighbors with some whole wheat bread, or whole wheat cookies or something like that. And I know you're going to have to watch out, because depending on the requirements of where you live, maybe you're going to be required to have a food processor's license or something like that, or maybe you're going to have a state-approved kitchen. So, check some of these things out. But it's just another opportunity to meet people. Never miss any opportunities that you can to meet up with people. If we had a roving mic here, I want to spend a little bit of time with some of your interaction, because, anytime you have an opportunity, people always have ideas that other people don't have. And if we can make that available and remember to turn it on and off as you're utilizing it. I want to share a few stories with how that we have utilized this. And understand that God is going to help you. You're not going to be in this all by yourself. And earlier we talked about in Isaiah 58, where it talks about the righteousness of the Lord is in front of us. His glory is behind us. We're protected on both sides as long as we are humble and meek and not arrogant, not trying to do this on our own. When the disciples tried to cast the demon out of that man's son using their own righteousness, it didn't work. Jesus said these kind come out by much prayer and fasting. You're going to have to really stay on your knees as a medical missionary, because you're going to need a lot of help. I want to tell you a little story about one of our neighbors. I call them neighbors. Anybody who's within about 8 miles of us is a neighbor, because of the type of locale that we live in. And there was a lady who happened to be driving through our area, and her truck had a problem. She thought she was out of gas, so she stopped at one of the other neighbors, and the neighbors said, well, can't help you, but these people up the road probably will. And so they called, and my wife went down to see if she could get her truck started again. And so it looked like it was out of gas. Took her to a gas station, bought a couple of gallons of gas, came back up and dumped it in the tank. And I asked her later, why didn't you pour some in the carburetor like you always do for a truck that's out of gas? And she said, well, I thought about that, but then I didn't think it was necessary, so I thought I'd try it the other way. And she said the moment they turned the key, the truck just fired up and drove away. But during the time she took her into town, got gas, and came back out again, they'd been talking and talking and talking. You know, who are you? What are you guys all about? What do you do? You know, where do you live? And, you know, her husband's a logger, and they wanted to know why, you know, what I did and why I stayed at home sometimes, you know, why I wasn't out in the forest or, you know. And so Lori told her some of what we do and that we work with, you know, natural remedies and our ties to naturopathic medicine, that type of thing. And she said, you know, I suffer terribly from rheumatoid arthritis. Is there any help for that? And my wife says, oh, of course there is. You know, to varying degrees, but many times there's a good help for it. And so this lady, whose name was Nina, said, I think I'd like to come back and talk to you later. I mean, today is not the day for this thing, but so very soon, she and her husband were at our door. And so her husband and her daughter, who had come with her, her daughter was a massage therapist, and she said, I can't even work on Mom because she hurts so bad. She said, because I was talking about how rheumatoid arthritis has so many muscle spasms associated, which causes the pain. And she said, I know, but I can't do anything. I touch her and she screams. And so during the course of this conversation, this lady, Nina, said, you know, the strangest thing was after I drove down the road, I looked at my gas gauge and I had a lot of gas in that truck. It wasn't out of gas. She said, I don't understand what happened other than, she said, I think an angel must have shut it off there so that we could find you. Now, I hadn't even helped her yet, okay? She still had all of her symptoms. She still had all of her pain. She was still miserable. She was still sick. But this is what she was impressed with. So we shared some of what it would take to do what she needed to do. And you know, you're talking about buying a Champion juicer and beginning to juice carrots and juice celery and juice greens. And, well, how much is one of those things? Well, we don't have that much money. You know, people are poor. But she said, you know, I have a neighbor, I think I can use hers. Well, it ended up the neighbor was gone on vacation for 2 months or whatever. She couldn't. So she came back to our house and juiced her vegetables so she could take them back home and drink them. And it was kind of an ordeal for her. And I began to share some various things that I work with, along with some of the food supplements and some of the vitamins that she needed to be on because she definitely had some deficiencies that were apparent. And some herbal blends that I had put together for this specific disease. And she began to really perk up, but she said, I can't afford to do any of that stuff. Maybe just this one little herbal tea that you're doing, I think I could afford that. She's very poor. So I said, let's start where we can afford to do this. She went home. I didn't hear from her for about 3 weeks. I thought, well, maybe she got discouraged. I didn't know what she was discouraged about. Well, she wasn't discouraged. She was just waiting to get a little more money, and she was quite encouraged. And she called back and she said, I'm getting better, and I haven't even done all the things you wanted me to do yet. And she came back, and this time she walked in the door and wasn't being carried again. And I looked at her, and she looked somewhat better. And she decided that she would do everything no matter what it cost. And as medical missionaries, remember, we want to be inexpensive. We want to be accessible, and we want to be simple as possible. We don't want to hook people on $200 or $100 a month for some sort of multi-level scam that's out there with these wonderful food supplements that some of these companies are into. And I know I'm going to offend somebody somewhere with this tape. I'm sorry. With most of you, you'll be in a new business in about 6 months, so you won't be mad at me then. That's been my experience with all these things all through time. However, she went home with everything. She began the program in earnest, and I didn't hear from her again. Of course, I'm busy. I travel. I lost contact in my mind with it. And one day I got a phone call, and she said, "Help, I'm going to run out of things, and I don't want to hurt anymore." And I said, "Anymore?" She said, "No, I don't hurt anymore." And she came, and it was like she was 25 years younger in her physical appearance. I looked at her and I said, "Sit down." And I reached down and I got a hold of her ankles and I began to push. Her ankles used to be this big, and now they were this big. All of that puffiness had begun to recede, and her hands, which had been so fat and so gnarled, began to look like normal ladies' hands again. And she was so thrilled, and we began to be able to talk, discovered she was a born-again Christian, began to share concepts of how Jesus was coming again. And she had some reservations because she understands we're Seventh-day Adventists, and that's kind of frightening to the people from the evangelical community to some extent. But we're not done. We've only just started. These are some of the experiences that will happen to you as you begin to practice this. You remember we read a quotation that as soon as we were trained, the field of labor would be developed for us? That's not an empty promise. I remember hearing that promise about 8 years ago and saying, that really sounds strange. Because at that time, nobody seemed to want to have anything to do with this kind of work. The people in the world scoffed at it. The people in the church scoffed at it. But there was two things happening. One is the vineyard, the grapes were beginning to get a little more ripe than they were before. World conditions are developing to where people are more receptive. And the other thing was, I needed more experience before God was just going to turn me loose in His harvest. But God will give you a starting place. God's not going to bring somebody with a serious problem to you for your first problem. He's going to bring somebody with simple things that you're going to feel comfortable in His power and His wisdom dealing with. And perhaps if you do find someone who does have greater needs than what you feel that you have expertise for, you need a network with other people who do what you do, so that you have an opportunity to interact with them and share information. Networking is very important. Remember this one concept, and it is very important, because there are times when I just draw a blank and I say, Lord, I do not know what to do. And someone's name will come into my mind and I'll call them, and they've just dealt with it and they know what to do. And that happens with me sometimes. Someone will call me and say, I'm drawing a blank, I got this person, I don't know what to do. And it's something that I've just been doing a lot with. If we have one another to depend on, we'll be a lot stronger than we are just by ourselves. So don't forget to network and to get phone numbers and addresses. And if you can develop a core group of people who do what you do in your locality, that will be even greater for you. But if you're the one and only who's going to stand alone, don't forget you've got the angels. Never forget that you have angels out there, because sometimes the angels are the ones who are going to go before and open the ways. I believe it was an angel who shut that lady's truck off at the end of our road. I don't know how else she would have done that. I've never, ever would have ever met her in any other way. Where they live is a little out of the way. I drive by there now and then, but I've never would have ever been, thinking about stopping there and saying, hi, can I help you with your rheumatoid arthritis? God will bring people and give us the opportunities. One important concept, and that is to pray for opportunities. I don't know if you've ever tried this, but if you say, Lord, this morning I'm committing my life to you again. I'm surrendering my will to you. I've prayed. I've studied. I've filled my mind with your scriptures, and I'm not talking about a 5-minute reading your little daily devotional thing. I wish people would get rid of those books and just get big books that have long chapters in them, or just study their Bibles, because we need to spend hours doing this type of thing. But if you'll pray and say, Lord, today is an important day in history. Today is a day that I want to be led to someone. Will you please bring someone across my path today, either by impressing my mind to go to them or by bringing them to me in some way? Lord, who can I help today? you will find that many times it is within God's providence to bring about that very happenstance today, this day. And what disgusts me with this whole concept is how often I forget to do this. Because when I do, it happens. I don't understand us. I really don't understand the dynamics of what's going on inside my mind sometimes, because I rarely can remember praying that prayer without having a very significant event happening that day. God will open doors of opportunity if you request them. You need to get on your knees and pray for these, and don't pray a tame prayer. Ellen White says she's amazed at how tame the prayers of the saints are. Not only should we be wrestling for our own salvation, but wrestling for the salvation of others. Get on our knees and pray and say, Lord, please take me to somebody or bring somebody to me today. I want to share these things with somebody, but I've got to be in connection with somebody today. And maybe God will impress you to go somewhere, to do something, to make an opportunity happen. Maybe He wants you to go out with little tracts like this and knock on doors. You'll find somebody if you spend enough time at it. Does anybody have any questions or suggestions as we go along here? I want to kind of break this up into where you're having a little more of the input into this right now. If you don't have anything, you're thinking about it, I can keep on sharing stories. I see some wheels turning behind some eyes. So.
Well, it just dawned on me, maybe you meant in the context of entering wedges. And it came to me that in the area where I live, there are some people that put out a little advertising sheet. And I had never really paid them any attention before. I think I kind of drifted through one once, but it was just about 8 sheets full of a lot of advertisements for businesses in the area. And I happened to look at one about Easter time, and there were some poems in there. And then there was a little advertisement that had a list of things. Do you have any of these things? We would like to have them entered into our paper. Well, I was a poet, and I thought, well, hey, I could put some of these poems in there. It was Easter time, so it had a little religious touch to a couple of the poems that they had in there. And so I thought maybe I could put some Christian literature in here in the form of poetry. So I chased the place down and showed him some of my poetry, and well, he was really impressed. He really wanted to have some of that stuff there. And I said, well, what type would you like? You know, it might be a little too religious for the tone of the paper. And he says, I like it all. Just give me whatever you will. And so I went and was preparing some poetry to turn in, and I happened to look at one of the magazines that he had given me, and on the front there was listed that they wanted natural remedies was one of the things that they had listed in there. Well, I'm really into natural remedies. And so I went back, as I had about 3 poems that I had prepared to submit, and said, well, now, these poems are real nice, but you know what I'm really into is natural remedies. And what I would like to do is prepare you a natural remedy for each issue. I noticed he had given me 3 or 4 issues of samples, and I went through them, and there were no natural remedies in there at all. They wanted them, but they didn't have them. So I said, I'd like to submit you a natural remedy for every issue, and you would be able to have it would be a regular input in your magazine. And he was just really excited about that. So I've been able to do that, and I haven't gotten any responses out of it, but it's taking a prominent place in the paper now, and it's I can see how the Lord can use that one of these days to make himself something out of the deal.
That's an excellent suggestion, and I'll give you a little bit of broadening of that perspective. If you will do a couple of things, now understand we're not trying to draw attention to ourselves. We're trying to draw attention to Jesus, but sometimes He has to use us to bring them there. It's good if you can find a local shopper paper or a small local newspaper that is looking for this type of thing, and don't be hesitant to volunteer, and just say, you know, I'm really into this kind of thing, and if you're really interested, supply it to you. There's no charge. But you want your name there. And sometimes you might write little things in there to let people know that you like to share this kind of thing with people, and a little more about you as a person. And people will begin in your community to develop a rapport with you even though they have never met you. They'll feel a familiarity with you. They'll begin to develop a confidence in you. I mean, look at Ann Landers, Dear Abby. How many people have a familiar confidence in Dear Abby or Ann Landers? Well, they wouldn't have the articles or the column running for as long as I can remember in my lifetime if it wasn't. People are constantly doing that type of thing. If Ann Landers came to town today, there'd be all kinds of people who'd want to sit down and meet Ann Landers and talk to her and ask her other things about other issues. You can have the same thing happen. Now, you've done this. How long have you been doing it?
Since Easter.
Okay.
After Easter.
Enough people, if you've done this in this fashion, should be aware enough of who you are. Now is time to turn around and ask the little man who has your little paper and say, would you be kind enough to put this little public service announcement in here for me? I've been giving you these little things forever and ever, or maybe you won't have to get that blunt, but I'd like to hold a class downtown, and I'd like to get, as a public service, it's always a public service humanitarian thing, I'd like the opportunity of advertising this in here as a public service. So, I'm doing this out of my own pocket. I really can't afford to pay you a whole lot for this. And now people say, oh yeah, that's that lady that writes those health tips in there. Yeah, I'd really like to meet her, and there's a lot of things I'd like to ask her. Also, don't be hesitant to allow people to write into the paper or write to you and carry the paper asking questions. Encourage that. That helps you to reach deeper into the community and bring people back out towards you. And they'll say, oh, that question and answer health lady has a class coming up. I want to go. You've already developed a reputation and a rapport with people even though you've never met any of them. Any other hands? These are good options. You will be amazed. Maybe you're a person who has some broadcast expertise behind you. I've discovered that a lot of the local small radio stations would be quite happy if you would bring them a 15 or a 30-minute radio program once a week. And they're not that hard to produce. I know a couple $1,000 sounds like a lot of money, but a couple $1,000 worth of equipment, you can make some really nice radio broadcasts. If I had the money, my local radio station right now would love to have us make radio broadcasts. They've told me that they are having requests for that type of thing and nobody does it. I just don't have the money to buy the equipment. But I know exactly what I would buy if I had the money right now. You'll find that there's an incredible potential, a vast empty spot out there for us to try and fill if we'll just do a little bit of resourceful thinking. Magazine articles. You can write submissions to magazines about this type of thing. There's a lot of small regional magazines. Don't forget, to put up. You can write little health tips. If you don't have a shopper, you don't have a little magazine, you don't have a radio station, you have nothing in your area, then write up a little health thing and get 4 little tacks and put it up on a grocery store bulletin board. Eventually people are going to say, oh yeah, that's kind of neat. I wonder if that lady or that man has got that thing up on that bulletin board this week. All kinds of opportunities to use these wedges.
Is there a good or logical or in your experience on how to maybe train some people in the church when we go back to create an interest or direction or a usefulness in the church that we belong to?
Well, that's a really excellent thing because you remember we said earlier that we don't want to teach students, we want to teach teachers. We want this to be the greatest multi-level organization ever started. But there's no greed involved with this multi-level organization. This organization gives everything for all. And it's harder. in some churches. I've had some churches where people said, no, I don't want to know anything, get out of our face, you're a fanatic, you're crazy, just keep it to yourself, don't raise your hand in Sabbath school class, whatever. I've had other churches where I just made an announcement in the bulletin or from the front that I would be willing to share some of what I learned. In your instance, I went, you don't have to say where you've gone if there's a resistance against Hope International or anything like that. But I just went to this training class, and we were able to share a lot of information there and pick up a lot of interesting things. I'd be happy to share that with you folks here at the church if you'd like to do that. How would Sunday afternoons be? Could people come out for Sunday afternoon or Tuesday evening or something like that, or before prayer meeting, whatever? I'd be happy to do an hour a week. And from some of the notes that I took there, share some of the things, and then maybe do an herbal demonstration making the salves and tinctures and that type of thing. That one, is so irresistible. It's so much fun to get into that people can't resist getting into that one. It'd be a real excellent bait to begin to give them more information through that vehicle. And you'll find that there's going to be 2 or 3 or 4 or whatever who are interested, and you'll begin to pique their interest. And they, in turn, are going to begin to develop their own interest, and you have no idea what you're going to turn loose of. The people who helped pique my interest in this type of medical missionary work had absolutely no idea what they were doing when they woke me up. They had no idea that I would ever take this to the level that I have done. And I didn't know either. But it was just so interesting and so rewarding that I couldn't stop as I began to progress in it.
There's a couple things I wanted to touch on. I've been here at Hope for just about a year, and I've been involved with Seventh-day Adventism for a few years, but I never heard anything about the health message other than seeing that book, Counsels on Diets and Foods, kind of there, but not really in any prominent position. But when I was going through the computer once, I found 174 entries for the right hand of the third angel's message. And that's just the right hand of the third angel's message. That didn't have any other entries. It wasn't counting the ones to the other angel's messages or the entering wedge. So I feel like, in fact, I'm absolutely positive we've not only dropped the ball, we've given it a good kick. And now I notice also that the New Agers seem to have the ball. And this is where I'm a bit intimidated. I like being good at what I'm doing before I start doing it around a bunch of people. So going door to door and knowing how it is around Yelm here, and we've got a lot of New Agers and people like that, I'm more likely to run into somebody who knows 10 times more than I'm going to learn in the next year. How do you deal with that kind of thing or how did you when you were first starting into it?
Well, God is good, and God doesn't let you in deeper water than you can swim in. And don't fear to go to any door with your angel beside you. Truly, it's faith. This is a faith ministry. Don't be afraid. God's not going to let you be made a fool out of because you're out there trying to serve Him earnestly. You may run into somebody who knows more of that type of material than you do, but they may just be plain impressed that you're trying to do something with it. You may be able to leave a tract. Let's say you leave a tract and you don't even know how to explain anything in the tract. Just the fact that you've taken it there is a genuine step in serving the Lord and broadening the field. Just from an old salesman, in my heart I'm a peddler. I love to sell things, and I love to sell this concept. I know that if I go out with anybody's brand of vacuum cleaner and start knocking doors, I'm going to get kicked off some doorsteps before the day is over. I'll probably get kicked off of 30 doorsteps, but somebody before the day is over is going to let me in and let me show my vacuum cleaner, and 1 out of 3 is going to buy it. I don't care what brand it is. That's just the odds. That's the statistics. And if you go out with God's cleaner and knock on doors, You might get knocked off of a few doorsteps, but somebody's going to buy your product. And that one person is going to make it worth it for all the rejection that you've ever gotten. And you have no idea how many, where the seeds spring up and where they don't spring up. Any more comments or suggestions or questions? Now, I've only shared some of the things that I have done. Sharing, friends, your enthusiasm. You have to have enthusiasm. You have to believe in what you do. Now, there are some people who are so fanatical about things and so overbalanced that they turn everybody off. But I haven't seen any fanaticism here this week. I haven't seen any overzealous, overbalanced enthusiasm. When I worked for a Fortune 500 company doing sales, the first thing that I had to do when I joined that company was buy the product myself. Our leader told us that you will not sell anything that you don't own. He said you absolutely will have a world of difference in your sales experience if you can say, now this is what I have, and I think this will fit you if we tailor make it to your needs. And they say, well, why do you have it? So number one is you have to be practicing what you're preaching. Because if you're not, you're going to be a real distraction to the message. Tremendous distraction. You tell these people, I've got this tract I'd like to share with everybody this week, and it's on clear and pure and water and how it's cleansing, and you got your dashboard of your truck full of Pepsi-Cola cans. You got problems. I mean, these people aren't blind. They recognize the red, white, and blue, and you're going to get a bad response. People want to see that you're practicing what you preach. But if you're enthusiastic, your friends, your neighbors, the people in your church are going to become enthusiastic as well. Now, did I see a comment in the back there? Lights are bright enough, okay. Thought I saw the microphone go zooming once there for a second. Okay. I think we've probably covered enough things to cause enough interest in somebody's mind somewhere. There is just limitless ways. We've discovered that the internet bulletin boards are an excellent way that we can share information with people. Just last week before I left, and I'm kind of curious when I go back to see what I find, there was a controversy on one of the bulletin boards over vitamin B12. And I put a little note on there, I'm sorry, folks, your arguments don't hold water. These are the things that I know that vitamin B12 are in, and I couldn't resist putting my name with my credentials behind it, but I don't know. Maybe I'm going to have somebody that I can develop some sort of a conversation with. This is another way. There are just limitless ways that we can find that we can reach people. Maybe you want to do a bulk mailing. If you had this in a shopper paper, it would cost you 6 cents in most areas to have this inserted per household for this to go out. Or maybe you want to write your own article that will cover all 8 laws and just very micro and crystal, just condense it all down and have a little card back in there that for more information on any one of these subjects, please write in for free information too. There are just no end to the ways that you'll be able to find interest. And once you start these things, don't forget that our opportunities now are to begin to share the message, to share Jesus, to share the soon coming of Jesus and the second coming and the 3 angels' messages. We are, again, like we've said in some of the earlier meetings, we're not trying to make healthy sinners. We're trying to save people for the kingdom of heaven. Don't just teach these people these things and then drop them on their head and let them go, because you haven't done anything for them then. Any more questions or comments, or we'll just bring this to a close? Question or comment? I'm going to send the microphone back.
How do you charge for this? I assume that a lot of it is you give away.
Most of it you're going to actually see a giveaway. I sometimes will go around to people in the Adventist community and say, hey, I want to start this little project. Yeah, he's got $10 or $50 or, I wouldn't ask for one nickel for myself, but if I'm asking for a project for the Lord, I have no qualms about being a beggar. And I'm amazed. The last project that I asked for money for, I needed $650 for a mail out. I stood up in church and said, I need $650 for a mail out. When I left church, I had $650. I got $100 from one person who didn't have it. I got $100 or $200 from another person who had it. And another lady came up to me and she said, how much money did you get? And I told her, and she said, how much do you need? And I told her, and she said, okay. And she wrote the balance and handed it to me. Friends, you'd be amazed at how people will help you if they see something's happening. Ellen White said that people will get excited when they see something happening. Most people don't see anything happening, and they are not excited. You will be amazed at how many people will help you if you're going to take the step and go forward. If you're going to hold public programs, do not feel at all ashamed to set a bucket up somewhere and call their attention to the fact that the hall rent costs so much money, or it's costing us money to put this program on. We're not charging for it. And any of you who feel like you're really deriving a benefit from it, feel free to help us out a little bit, because we're just kind of reaching down in our own pockets as humanitarians and just trying to help you out. And if if we've been of a benefit to you, feel free. And they've always more than covered our expenses. It's not going to cost you anything to do this type of thing. And if it does, then the Lord will supply it. My dad told me years ago, I was having a selfishness problem. And he told me, you got to get that stuff out of your pocket or the Lord won't have any place to put any more. He said, you can't outgive him. He's got more than you have. And that's been very true. I've never gone hungry or had to, go without any of the real necessities just because I wanted to put some money into the work. Yeah, maybe I didn't get some new software for the computer, and maybe, maybe I didn't get a new car, or maybe I didn't get to buy the new suit. Once I wanted to do something and I really had a project in mind, and that was the same time my wife found this really nice suit at JCPenney. And she said, come try this on, and I tried it on. I mean, it fit me. I got sort of an unusual build. They don't make Jack and the Beanstalk type clothes. And so here I am, and this thing fits. Really nice, looked great, and it was the new type. I'm wearing the same suit I had from 15 years ago. And here's this nice one. I mean, it's obviously the latest. It's not obviously the oldest like the other one was. And I took that thing home, and I felt bad about it the whole way. And I said to myself the next day, I said, I just can't do this. And I told my wife, I'm going to take that suit back to Penny's. And she said, what for? And I said, because it's not right for me to be struggling, and I don't have quite enough money to do this project for the Lord, and me to go buy a new suit when the one I have covers me fine, and nobody's ridiculing me for wearing it, and it's warm, and it's clean, and it doesn't look that bad. And I took it back, and I had enough money to do my project. We may sacrifice some of the things that are superficial and don't really matter. One more in the back. I knew something was going to happen in the back if we just waited long enough.
A comment. Even if a person is kind of like, quote, blackballed in an area, Dennis and I, the pastor in our area, has blackballed Seventh-day Adventists, and they know us well, so they don't really want us, to say anything or to do anything. But in ideas, I like your bulletin board idea. We could put a health nugget up there, not with our names on to begin with, but after the first few health nuggets, when people are really starting to read them, after a while we can put our names up there. Just
Sure.
an idea. I mean, it's just, if somebody out there listening to the video has, been blackballed in that neighborhood, don't use your name for a while maybe. But the health nuggets are very valuable.
You'll find that that's an excellent way that you can get started. Don't forget to ask the Lord. You want wisdom? Go to the Lord. He will be faithful in giving you all the ideas that you need to get started. You will not suffer for ways to work if you're willing to work. Can you imagine if you had a tremendous job to do and someone who is qualified came along and telling them, no, I'm not going to tell you what you need to do around here? God's not a dummy. He's just as cognizant as he always was. He hasn't changed at all, and he knows what work needs to be done, and he knows when he's finally gotten you to the point where you're ready to start the work, he is not going to leave you wondering what your work is. He will connect you with it, but you're going to have to make certain that there's nothing between. We need to really empty ourselves out and ask the Lord to show us if we've got things in our hearts, because if we've got things in our experience or in our hearts that will prevent us from being a good witness, then he's going to hold us out until he's got us ready. And I can testify to that one personally. So surrender everything and you'll be a successful missionary. Let's bow our heads and we'll close with a prayer. Father in heaven, I want to thank you for this opportunity that we can share with one another, opportunities to work for you. And we pray that we will not be limited by our own doubts and our own lack of enthusiasm, but we will go forward and we will share, and we will be able to take the stories of our successes for you and to share those with other people who want to do this work. We will motivate them and gain in them a confidence and an excitement for finishing the work. In Jesus' name we pray, amen.